Good day. My name's Cydnie Ridling, and I'm talking about residency requirements today for the legal class. Residency requirements, when you think about that, your first thought to me is you think about, okay, what's required for residency when I want to go to this particular school, when I want to apply for a grant, or when I want to get certain benefits that are only available for a certain area. But there's also residency requirements that are made for conditional for employment. A lot of those conditions go for what I really didn't understand until I was reading this chapter. I usually thought of that as for just public officials, people that were high up the food chain in politics. But they also are conditioned for employments for public officers, which we just discussed for a second, and healthcare officials, people that are high up in healthcare at hospitals, that sort of thing, and court personnel, judges, clerk of court, and also public safety personnel, which I never had really put much thought into that, as I've always kind of lived small town and worked small town, although I do live one county over from where I work. A residency requirement for employment is just that. It just restricts a person when they're employed at a certain jurisdiction, county, city, that they have to live within a certain perimeter, within inside probably that city limit or that county or jurisdiction. So that it just puts a restriction on them. Sometimes it's as soon as they apply, they have to live there, or within 6 months they have to move there. Sometimes they give them a year, but it's usually for sure spelled out inside the application. Sometimes when you apply, what I've read in these cases is that it's most of the time it's spelled out pretty clearly. A lot of times, what it has loopholes is that you have to reside there, but it doesn't say at the time of application and at the time of hire, but it doesn't say that you have to remain a resident within that perimeter. So a lot of times what happens is people will set up a residency and reside there while they apply, and once they're hired, then they move out into the areas that they want to move out. Or sometimes people set up we're going to call it a mock residence, and or they just have enough money to, I guess, rent an apartment for a year, especially those that are higher up that may apply for a chief's position or a sheriff's position or whatever, and then they have their still main residence in another jurisdiction. A couple of cases that we'll talk about. Some of them we're going to skim over really quick. One is 1976. There was McCarthy versus Philadelphia Civil Service Commission, and it was really a 16-year vet of this fire department, which was Philadelphia Fire Department. He actually had lived within their perimeters. He did know when he was hired that he needed to live inside the perimeters that was set by the Philadelphia Fire Department, and after 16 years of employment, he decided to move to New Jersey, which was outside those perimeters, and he was terminated. He took it to court, and the Pennsylvania courts ended up denying the reviews. They claimed that the case involves a bona fide, which is just a genuine continuing residency requirement that was spelled out to him in the very beginning, and it is not in any violation of his rights of interstate travel, and the judgment was actually for the state of Pennsylvania. So he was not in any they were not in any violation there. So as you can see, residency requirements are honored as long as they're done in the right way, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Also, I tried to dig up some things that were possibly local to Georgia, so we could look at those. In 1976, the city of Atlanta adopts a residency requirement. The mayor decides it was a good thing, and he signs off on it, and the city adopts it. There was a claim by Michael Myers that was a firefighter there, but he also was representing several public safety people in this case. So they go before the court system, and he said that it was in violation of his constitutional rights, and the residency requirement was constitutional, and it should not be enforced. Well, when it went to court, the judge did decide that it was in violation of the of general law, and that the ordinance is unreasonable. So he did side with the employees. So that was that residential requirement in the city of Atlanta was terminated. So it wasn't used anymore. The biggest case that we're going to discuss is the one that was listed in our book, which was the NAACP versus North Hudson Regional Fire and Rescue, and that was December 12th of 2011, which is pretty recent. They were allowing, New Jersey was allowing numerous of their local municipalities and local governments to give a hiring preference to the residents in the area. So what they were doing is they were just creating this hire list that was compiled of local residents. And the one in particular that we're going to discuss is New Hudson, New Jersey. So what they did is, if you were residents there, then they gave you preference over hiring. If you were non-residents, they basically, you were wasting your time even filling out an application. So the problem with that was that once you were hired, they verified that you were a resident one time, and then they never looked to see if you lived there again. So, we talked about that bogus residence. They could set up a bogus residence or live with a family member, friend, and then once they were hired, then they could move out. North Hudson at that time was predominantly white and Hispanic. They had only just a few African American firefighters. So they're also, the demographics of where the community that they served mimicked that. It was the same. So the NAACP sues North Hudson, and they're alleging that the residency requirement caused an unequal advantage for the African American candidates, and because it just didn't give them an opportunity for employment, and it gave the white and Hispanics an advantage over them. The North Hudson Fire Department came back and claimed that it was a business necessity defense for their residency requirement, and that's why they made it a condition of employment. And business necessity defense means that in order for them to do good business and their business to be successful and run, that they had to implement this residency requirement. That's in a nutshell what that means. A couple of the reasons they gave was that if they were residents there, they would have more pride in their community, and they'd have more buy-in. They would understand and realize territory better, and also that because the largest majority of their community was Spanish speaking, that they needed people that could speak Spanish. The NAACP, what they had to come back and prove is that North Hudson could have alternate ways to meet the needs of the department, and they didn't really have to use discriminating practices to be able to meet those needs to establish good business practices. All of North Hudson's reasoning and arguments, they were unsubstantiated, and the reasons we'll give is because the firefighters were relocating once they were hired, so they couldn't really claim that they had to be residents because they weren't checking to make sure they were residents after that first time. That was also discounted that there really was no establishment of community pride or a heightened sense of territory familiarization, because they didn't hang around in the county. They moved outside the county, and that was proven. They also were assuming that just because the community was Hispanic, that they only spoke Spanish, and that was also disproven. It was discredited. So they really had no defense at that point. So when that came back, North Hudson decided that they were going to have an argument called disparate impact on violation of the Title VII. Well, Title VII's disparate impact provision, it really just, what that does is it promotes employers from having these practices of an unintentional effect of discriminating based on a person's race. The plaintiff has to demonstrate that the application of this neutral standard has caused a significantly discriminating hiring practice or hiring pattern. They claim that if they abolish the residency requirement, this is what North Hudson claims, if they do away with the residency requirement, it's now going to create a disparate impact upon the Hispanic applicants, and it's also going to open them up to litigation. Well, that didn't work either. The court still decided that the judgment was for the NAACP and their plaintiffs because they proved a prima, I'm going to say facie case or of disparate, not justified by business necessity by the North Hudson Fire Department. And eradicating the residency restriction, what as the North Hudson was saying, they said that it would open them up for litigation and that it would cause a problem for the Hispanic community because now they would be suppressed by it. So what the courts basically said was, well, that's really not true because number one, you're going to have to imply you're going to have to this judicial mandate is going to have to be enforced, and you're not the one enforcing it. The court is, so therefore it can't be looked at as being racial implied because the court is pushing you to do it, and it's not an unfair process because now we're just giving everyone an equal opportunity to apply for these positions. So now only the Hispanic and the white population now just has to compete with African Americans for these positions. Nobody's really getting a leg up anymore. So that was bogus as well. So Title V of the Civil Rights Act was violated by the North Hudson Fire Department's residency requirement for firefighter candidates due to its disparate impact on African American applicants. And that was kind of the base just for the whole issue, and North Hudson's arguments were all discredited. There's still residency requirements in effect today in fire services. You can go to New York City's firefighting website and look at where you apply for a firefighting position there, and you can see that they have residency requirements on their firefighters there, and it's listed right there on their website with all the other requirements for a position. What it says is that you must reside in one of the 5 boroughs of New York, and it says or live in Nassau, Orange, Putnam, Rockland, Suffolk, or Westchester County. So there are still some restrictions, and I'm going to basically read this off because it's pretty lengthy. The 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause keeps states from denying any individual equal protection of laws the same as any person in the same situation under the same circumstances. Title V ensures the workplace is an environment free of discrimination where race is not a barrier to opportunity. Title VII also makes it illegal for an employee to limit, segregate, or classify his employees or applicants for employment in any way which would deprive or tend to deprive any individual of job opportunities because of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Also practices that disproportionately adverse effects on minorities, known as disparate impact, are unlawful. And if employment practices any of these, they will be struck down by this title. So these are basically the arguments that the employee takes when they're pushing these residency requirements to be struck down. And that's pretty much the gist on residency requirements. There's a lot more because law always has these tunnels that tunnel off into all different directions. But that's just it in a nutshell. And I hope I taught you a little bit about residency requirements today. And I hope you guys have a great day.